You're listening to the Feel Good Astrology podcast with Louisa Tannermunson. To request your personal reading, go to feelgoodastrology.com.
Hey there, welcome to Pluto Through the Houses. This is the second episode, which is Pluto Through the Second House, where I'm going to be looking at what it's like to have Pluto in the second house at birth, and also what it's like to go through having Pluto transiting, i.e. moving through your second house. For those of you that have listened in before, welcome back. And if you're a new listener exploring how you can use Pluto to the best advantage in your life, then just welcome. It's really nice to have you here. In this short podcast, I'm going to be exploring all sorts of different aspects of Pluto, including, the strengths of this position, the challenges, what to do when Pluto is connected beautifully to other planets in your chart, and also how that might affect you if, the connections between Pluto and other planets isn't so good. So, before we get going, let's just recap on some of the main themes of Pluto before we address Pluto in the second house. So Pluto is a planet that really transforms our experience. It's the god of wealth and power and also the underworld. So it really shows us where our darkness is and what we could really do with bringing to the light of consciousness. If you want to know more about the mythology of Pluto, then please do check out Pluto in Aquarius, one of my recent podcasts, which has quite a lengthy description of the mythology of Pluto. But really, essentially, Pluto shows us where we seek power. It shows us where we feel weak and vulnerable. It also pinpoints how our ego seeks to safety-proof our life so that we don't fall victim to what we fear is going to happen. There's a really strong element of control there. Pluto really likes to control things so much. It also shows us where we experience trauma and manipulation, where we might have an enjoyment of sexual prowess and also imbalance. It also shows us some of the enemies that might come into our life and exactly how they might show up. From a spiritual point of view, I think Pluto shows up to show us an area in our life that we've yet to yield to. Pluto often shows up as an unseen outside power. And as such, we're always trying to safety guard ourselves, against that which we don't know and that which we fear might happen. And so personal experience has proven to me over and over, and also the experience of my clients, that when we're fighting for control against an outside force, it's usually us that comes off worse. And so I do think Pluto, by natal position and also by transit, really shows us where we might have a false awareness of the power that we have. And also it really indicates how we can be humble, how we can come face to face with an almost impermanent and impermeable barrier, and how we can actually move beyond that barrier when we yield to it. So all the time we're trying to control our fears. Usually other things come in to kind of smack us down a little bit. Such is the beauty of Pluto. It's really a long, slow event or series of events. When Pluto is coming into your life, it usually shows you it usually reveals itself as a series of things that are occurring. And if we don't listen to the call of Pluto, we often find those things get worse and worse and harder. So, essentially, it's one of the deepest and painful things to learn about. But here's the thing, it always, and I think without exception, teaches us where we can become truly free. And so from that, I actually think it's a great part of our chart, though when we're in the center of a hurricane, when we're in the middle of this tornado or this energy sink that Pluto provides, and this intensity, it often doesn't feel very much like a benefit or a gift. So anyway, in the second house, Pluto is bringing up quite a few different themes, in particular themes to do with our money, our earnings, access to resources, and how we value ourselves. So if you're born with Pluto in the second house, it really shows how you seek power through your ability to own things and through your ability to earn things and earn money. So if Pluto is very strongly placed in your chart, in your second house, and that it's got some really good links to other planets, i.e. With trines and sextiles and things, the chances are you'll be naturally able to bring in wealth and naturally able to bring in resources. The chances are you've got this kind of magic touch where what you need kind of finds you in quite a magical way. If you've got squares, like difficult squares to Pluto in your second house, the chances are you really struggle to earn these things and to control what is coming into your life. So, for instance, you might find that you've got a really strong desire to receive great wealth, and yet you are also putting up restrictions like, I want to become wealthy from doing this. And then you've internally put up a barrier to any other kind of wealth that comes in. So if you become really fixed in how you want to become wealthy, the chances are your receivership, your level of receiving is going to be actually not very powerful, and so it could be quite frustrated. So that's just one element, our earnings. And I think a lot of astrologers actually downplay the second house and do it out of some magnificence. It's always talking about money and earnings and our and how happy we are to deal with those earnings, but it really doesn't talk about how we value ourselves. And obviously we are our own biggest resource. So I think how we value ourselves is really important. And where Pluto is in our second house, I think, one of the things we're also learning is without wealth, who are we? Like, what intrinsic value are we bringing the world? So again, there's this insane and very deliberate kind of creation of purpose. We absolutely are trying to find our way. And that way is by being important somehow, having some purpose, having some intrinsic value. That may or may not bring us wealth, but it brings us power, which is equally as important. And one of the fears that you might have is that actually you're insignificant in business, and that you don't have the wealth to survive, but actually you're insignificant in life, like the sum total of your efforts that you might go to earn some money or to create some influence. You may well feel absolutely insignificant in such a way that it crushes you and leaves you dejected and unable to move beyond that. So there's a really strong theme of purpose and, what is our value. What we're really needing to learn here with Pluto in the second house is that significance isn't really about your earnings, it's about the value you bring. And it might be that what you're bringing is a whole bunch of social value, a whole bunch of family value, a whole bunch of environmental impact or something like that. There's lots of different ways to be significant and to have power and to have influence. And so something that might cause you pain, that may well arise as a person or a situation. So what causes you pain is people who steal or reduce your opportunity to thrive. So, people who might use their wealth against you, people who might use their wealth against you to stop you from earning. It could be people who are very competitive and do things to sabotage you. It might be people who use their wealth to get you to do things, like they promise you power, to do that they'll give you something if you do something. And that really causes you pain because it's kind of selling out your intrinsic purpose and selling out the belief that you might have in yourself, that you really can survive and you really can thrive. And that thrival can come from you and your own abilities. So you may find that people who devalue you with gaslighting are some of the most insidious people in your life, which causes you a lot of pain. You end up feeling absolutely crushed and like there's no value to who you are. How to find freedom then? Now, I mean, I've really described the darker aspects of it, but there's some really great parts of this, and I guess that is how you are going to find your freedom. Like the first step is to realize that you're not your earnings. You know that that there's so much more to you than just what you're bringing in. So, for instance, you might have come into a life where there's been a lot of money or not very much, and that people are putting expectations on you based on your family history. Or you may well find that it's difficult to find yourself in a relationship where you feel completely valued for who you are rather than valued for what you bring to the relationship. Another way to find freedom is to realize that you can have power, and there are different ways of using that power. So, for instance, some people use their power and influence to just have more power and influence. Other people use their power and influence to decentralize it, to share it, to help raise other people up. So again, I think finding freedom is in realizing that the perception of power and influence through wealth is actually a misnomer. You're not really getting true power. The true power, I think, comes from having the freedom to enjoy it, and it's much more readily available when you're able to share it. And one of the things I notice about Pluto in particular is where Pluto is kind of hoarding. If you think Pluto is the god of wealth, he's kind of hoarding all that wealth underground, in this kind of dark place of deprivation and all the kinds of things that we're not prepared to do to get wealthy. Pluto has no problems because for him it's the ultimate power or the ultimate wealth, and that is where the energy goes. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because you can look at Pluto and the idea of power and the idea of ultimate wealth, and if you've got that sort of Western programming that you can make anything you want of yourself. We're living in a time of opportunity, but B, that money is intrinsically bad and the cause of everything, and that rich corporatocracies and wealthy individuals are the cause of all the pain, then it's going to be very difficult for you to find freedom. So I think it's really important to realize that you can be powerful with or without money, and also that you can be valuable, and your value isn't linked into money. And from that comes that freedom. One of the freedoms that you might have is that you realize that you have enough to be able to do what you want and also to create influence. Now, there are other things, going on with resources. So it's not just about like actual cash. I mean, we could be talking about property. We could be talking about land. It could be that you're very resourceful. And, one of the key themes of Pluto is to transform things, which is perfect for recycling. It's perfect for regenerating. It's perfect for like turning over houses, for instance, or taking one thing and transforming it into something that has more money. So talent scouts could even fall into this kind of category. Just to reiterate, where your Pluto in the second house is connected beautifully to other planets with trines and sextiles, you've got the strength to overcome poverty, and you're always able to powerfully gain what you need at different times in magical ways. And one of the great things with Pluto is once you let go of the desperation of like, I must do this, I must control this, because if I don't control this, I'm going to die. That's the sort of choice we get to. But it's like, as you release yourself from the fears of never having it, it's like all of a sudden it will start to trickle in, and you'll start to get the intuition that will give you what you need to find. Now, with squares and oppositions, it feels like you're so dejected that you'll never have enough, and you'll never feel you'll ever have enough, and that it's kind of stacked up against you. And, if you think it's useful to unpack this more in a small online study group, then please just get in touch to arrange that. It's louisatannermunson@gmail.com, because, I'm always connecting and doing these little small groups so we can unpack this, between us and, help each other. Now, if you've got Pluto going through your second house, and, I'll be open with you, like I've had Pluto going through my second house for probably about 15 years or so. When it goes through this house, it's going to bring up a lot to do with your economical survival. So your need to economically survive and thrive is like really important. And it's so important that it's got imbalanced, and it feels as if you have no value, like I've already said, but it's bringing it into your current, expression. It almost feels like one of the things that's going on is if you can't prove that you've got the money, the worth isn't there. And it's like the big task at hand is how you can feel magnificent without financial power, and how you can feel magnificent without the trappings of wealth. If you think about it, when Pluto is transiting through your second house, previously it's been in your first house. And the first house, Pluto, is about experiencing the joy of being 100% yourself. So as it's going through your second house, you might want to ask yourself, how can I be 100% myself and also always have what it is that I need to thrive? And if you can be that sort of curious about it, the chances are you're going to be inviting it in. But the moment you try and control it and says, it has to happen this way, it has to happen this way because of the narrative that I've been brought up in, or this is what I'm expecting and this is what I need. The moment you say that, it's almost like Pluto's like, oh, really? Says who? You? You and whose army? The energy of Pluto will confront you, and Pluto is infinitely stronger. So, it shows you where you need to yield. You will probably work very, very hard and at times not really gain much more wealth, and it can be quite frustrating. And you think, crikey, what is the point of it? Am I ever going to get free of it? But it will give you options to find power and find others, and possibly senior positions. So you'll find that you'll work, and you might improve, but you might not quite get that sense of satisfaction. So it's quite a tough learning here, especially given that in the modern world, if you don't have money, it appears you don't have power. But that is the challenge. It is allowing you, it's teaching you how to find value in who you are, for who you are. So it's not just about being 100% yourself. It's now actually being 100% yourself and realizing the value of who you are. And then, you might even realize that you've wasted some of your life so far because, you've been so concerned about your wealth that you maybe have gone off course. You've gone off your karmic course. So, as Pluto goes through the second house, you may well find that you accept a lifestyle with less income because it's more in alignment with your core values, how you would like to show your value. So, for instance, with me, for the first short while of it, I was working in corporate, and it's very easy. I mean, I was never going to get very rich working in a corporate environment, but it was very steady and very stable, and it offered you a certain amount of status. And then, the questions came. It was like, what am I doing? How is this serving me? Is this really suiting who I am? And then my conflict became, how can I become how can I thrive whilst being myself? And so it's a huge lesson, and it's something that, like I said, if you've got a big second house, it could take a couple of decades to get through it, but it's still a very important and poignant lesson to learn. So just to remind you, if you think it's useful to unpack more in a small online study group, then get in touch at louisatannermunson@gmail.com, or maybe even just book in for a one-to-one consultation. So anyway, I hope that's been helpful, and look forward to catching you in another session soon. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the Feel Good Astrology podcast with Louisa Tanner Munson. To request your personal reading, go to feelgoodastrology.com.